Okay, so you want to get smarter, right? Like fast. That's why you're here.
The goal isn't it?
Exactly. You
Yeah.
want to cut through all that noise and just get to the good stuff,
I feel that.
to what really matters. And that is why we are here today taking a deep dive
That's right. A deep dive.
into something that may seem simple at first,
Yeah.
but is actually a really rich part of Americana.
Uh-huh.
You know what I'm talking about? Those painted ads?
Oh, yeah, those. Yeah.
You might have seen driving through rural areas the mail pouch tobacco barn.
Classic.
There's a whole story behind these things.
Absolutely. So much to unpack there.
There is. So to unpack it all, we have gathered some really fascinating material.
Oh, yeah. We did our homework for sure.
Log posts from the Hagen History Center,
Uh-huh.
modern timbercraft,
Good stuff.
that old reliable friend Wikipedia,
Always got to check Wikipedia.
a really great summary of some video content we found,
Mhm.
and even some background straight from the official website of the state of West Virginia.
Straight from the source.
So we've got it all.
It's going to be good.
Our mission, should you choose to accept it,
And I think you have.
and I think you have, is to understand the full picture of these iconic barns.
The whole story.
We want to know where they came from, how many of them were out there, their impact, and why these once common sites are now becoming so rare.
Yeah. It's kind of sad, actually,
It is kind of sad.
to see them go.
So where does it all begin? Where does the mail pouch tobacco barn story begin?
Well, it all starts with the Bloch Brothers Tobacco Company in Wheeling, West Virginia.
Okay.
Today, they're part of Swisher International, but their origin story is really quite something.
Okay.
It was a flood in 1884 that really set their path.
Really a flood?
Yeah, flood. So Aaron and Samuel Bloch, they had a general store,
Uh-huh.
but the floodwaters came in and pretty much wiped it out.
Oh, no.
But their small cigar factory, which was on the second floor,
Okay.
it survived.
Wow.
Talk about a sign.
A sign from above, right?
Exactly. So this disaster, it actually led them to focus entirely on tobacco, and specifically chewing tobacco.
Now, chewing tobacco, this wasn't just any old chew, was it?
No,
No.
no, not at all. They were adding flavors, like molasses,
Oh, okay.
making it a bit different and packaging it in pouches. So mail pouch.
So they're already setting themselves apart a little bit.
Right. And in a market crowded with all these chewing tobacco brands,
Sure.
they needed to stand out.
They needed a way to get people's attention.
Absolutely. And that's where the idea of using barns as these huge mobile billboards came in.
Wow.
And this wasn't just some short-lived thing either.
Beautiful.
This advertising campaign ran for over a century, from 1891 to 1992.
100 years.
Over 100 years, yeah.
That's impressive.
It is that kind of staying power that's
Yeah.
remarkable.
So when we picture these barns, in our minds, it feels like they were everywhere.
You got that right.
Was that actually the case? Like, how widespread were these things?
You're spot on at its peak, which was around the early 1960s. There were approximately 20,000 mail pouch barns painted across 22 states.
22 states.
Yeah, 22 states.
That's a huge visual presence.
Right across the American landscape.
Wow. So which parts of the country were we seeing these in?
Well, mainly the eastern half of the country,
Okay.
but they did go pretty far west. California,
Oh, wow.
Oregon, Washington.
Wow. Okay.
But the real heartland was the upper Midwest.
Gotcha.
Ohio, for instance, had over 800 documented locations.
Wow.
And Pennsylvania wasn't far behind with nearly 475.
That's a lot.
You'd also see them in West Virginia, of course, Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, New York, Michigan, Maryland, Iowa, New Jersey, South Carolina, Tennessee, Wisconsin,
Wow.
even Connecticut.
So they were really all over.
Yeah, pretty broad distribution.
That's a logistical feat in itself.
It is.
To get all those barns painted and maintained across that many states, how did they even manage to do that?
Well, at first they relied on local painters.
Okay.
Makes sense,
Oh,
starting out.
Sure.
But as the campaign grew, they had to streamline things.
Okay.
So by 1925, they started contracting these two-man teams who would go around the countryside looking for and painting these barns.
Okay.
These guys were the boots on the ground.
Yeah.
They were the ones who decided which barns to approach,
Yeah.
negotiate with the farmers.
And what was the pitch? Why would a farmer agree to have their barn become a giant ad for chewing tobacco?
Well, the agreement was pretty simple, actually.
Okay.
Mutually beneficial, too.
Okay.
Farmers would get a small fee, like $1 or $2 a month.
Doesn't sound like much.
Not today, but back then, especially in rural areas,
Yeah, it makes sense.
that was a decent bit of extra income.
Right.
And often they get free mail pouch tobacco.
Free tobacco.
Yeah, for their own use.
I mean, I guess I could see why a farmer might say yes to that deal.
Yeah.
free tobacco and some extra cash.
Exactly.
But there had to be something else, right? Beyond just the immediate payment.
Oh, for sure. There was a big advantage for these farmers.
What was it?
So the Bloch brothers, they paint at least one side of the barn with their advertisement.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the whole thing.
Really?
And that meant a fresh coat of paint.
Okay. Yeah, that's important.
That's a huge practical benefit, right?
Of course.
Protects the wood from the elements, extends the life of the barn.
That's a big deal.
Plus, the company would come back every few years and repaint that mail pouch slogan.
So it was always looking fresh.
Always looking good and visible for travelers.
Smart.
So it really was win-win.
Yeah, sounds like it.
The Bloch brothers got their brand in front of millions of people traveling on those main roads.
Right before the interstate system came in.
Exactly. And the farmers got some financial help and a well-maintained barn.
Everybody wins.
Pretty much.
Now, what did these ads actually look like?
Oh, yeah.
Was there a standard design?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There was a very distinct and consistent design.
Okay.
And that's what made it so recognizable.
Gotcha.
The standard message was, chew mail pouch tobacco. Treat yourself to the best, in big, bold yellow or white letters.
Okay.
And the background was usually black or red,
Okay.
which really made the letters pop.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'd see these thin, vertical blue borders on the sides, just framing the whole ad.
Okay.
And that classic look, that's what people really remember.
Yeah, I can almost picture those bold yellow letters
Right.
against that dark background.
It's classic.
I remember reading something about another advertisement
Oh, yeah.
that could appear on the same barn.
That's right. So depending on the location of the barn
Okay.
and how visible it was from different roads,
Mm-hmm.
the Bloch brothers might also put an ad for their Kentucky Club pipe mixture
Oh, okay.
on one of the other sides.
So they're really making use of all that space.
Absolutely making the most of that barn.
Okay, so we've got the company, we've got this incredible scale of the operation. We've
Yeah.
got the agreement with the farmers.
Right.
Now let's talk about the man who became almost synonymous with these painted barns.
Oh, yeah.
Hurley Warwick.
Ah, yes. Hurley Warwick, the legend.
He's a pretty central figure to this whole thing.
Absolutely a fascinating guy.
Yep.
He started painting for Bloch brothers after he came back from World War II,
Okay.
1946, and kept going until he retired in 91 or 92.
That's a long time.
That is an incredible run.
It is. And the number of barns he painted himself
Oh, my gosh.
is mind-boggling.
It really is.
It's hard to even comprehend.
Reportedly, he painted or repainted over 20,000 barns himself.
20,000.
Think about that. A lifetime of painting, traveling those back roads.
He must have seen it all.
He must have seen it all becoming a fixture of that rural landscape.
And they say he could paint a whole barn in about 6 hours.
Yeah, that's what they say.
And without stencils or straight edges?
No stencil, straight from the hip.
That's skill.
That's incredible skill and practice.
He must have been so good at it.
Yeah, he famously said he did it all from habit.
And from habit.
Yeah, after painting that many.
Yeah.
There's a great quote from him. He said, the first 1,000 were a little rough. After that, you get the hang of it.
That's hilarious.
A bit of an understatement.
Definitely an understatement.
But it just shows the dedication and mastery he developed.
And I heard he had a particular way he started each barn.
He did a little ritual.
Yeah, what was it?
They say he always started with the letter E in the word chew,
Oh, wow.
just his way to kick things off on each new barn.
I like that.
A small detail, but it adds to the legend.
It does. And Hurley Warwick was obviously the most prolific.
Right.
But he wasn't the only one out there with a paintbrush.
Oh, no, he wasn't alone.
There were other painters.
Other talented painters, for sure.
Yeah.
Guys like Mark Turley, Don Shires, and Dick Green.
Okay.
They all contributed to the campaign.
Over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, so this huge, decades-long visual campaign, it had to end sometime.
It did.
What happened? What brought this era to a close?
Well, in 1969, the Bloch Brothers Tobacco Company was sold to the General Cigar and Tobacco Company.
Okay.
And the new owners, they decided to discontinue the barn painting campaign.
Wow.
Maybe they felt that other forms of advertising were more effective.
Yeah, maybe.
You know, times were changing.
Times were changing.
The media landscape was changing. It was a big shift.
So what happened to Hurley Warwick then? Did he just retire?
No. Actually, the new owners, they recognized his dedication.
Good.
And they let him keep working.
Oh, wow.
Mainly touching up those existing barns.
Okay.
Just to keep them looking good.
To maintain them.
Yeah, until he finally retired in the early 90s.
So even after the campaign was officially over, his work was still out there.
Still visible, yeah, for quite a while.
Now, I remember reading about a piece of federal legislation
Oh, yeah.
that could have ended it all much sooner.
Uh-huh.
The Highway Beautification Act?
Right.
What was that all about?
So the Highway Beautification Act of 1965,
Okay.
this was a big deal, championed by President Lyndon B. Johnson.
Oh, wow.
It was aimed at limiting roadside advertising,
Okay.
what a lot of people considered visual clutter,
Sure. I can see that.
along the nation's growing highway system.
Right.
So initially, these regulations, they did pose a threat to the mail pouch barns.
Oh, yeah, of
I
course.
mean, they were roadside advertisements.
Right.
No way around that.
But these barns, they survived.
They did.
How did they avoid being swept up in all that?
Well, that's where West Virginia Senator Jennings Randolph comes in.
Okay.
He was a key player.
Okay.
He recognized how culturally and historically important these barns were.
Right.
So in 1974, he championed an amendment to the Highway Beautification Act.
Okay.
And this amendment essentially grandfathered in the mail pouch barns.
Okay, so they were exempt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because they were already there before the act was fully in place.
They were allowed to stay.
They were allowed to stay.
Wow, that's amazing.
They were officially recognized as landmark signs
really
because of their historical value.
wow. So they went from being eyesores to landmarks.
Pretty much a complete turnaround.
Quite a transformation.
Yeah.
And even though the painting program ended decades ago, I understand that Swisher International still has some connection to these barns.
They do. It's more symbolic now, really.
Okay.
Swisher International, they still pay a small fee.
Okay.
I think it's around $10 a year
$10 a year.
to some of the owners of those remaining barns.
Wow.
Yeah, at this point, it's more of a gesture,
Uh-huh.
you know, a nod to the history and legacy of the whole campaign.
That's nice of them.
It is.
But even with this recognition and this small stipend,
Right.
the reality is that these barns are slowly disappearing, aren't they?
Unfortunate, yeah.
It's true.
It must be tough to preserve them.
It is. They're vulnerable, without regular repainting.
And that's up to the owners now.
Exactly.
Right.
So they're subject to deterioration, neglect,
Yeah.
and of course, demolition if the land gets redeveloped.
That's a shame.
They're such a part of our visual history.
They really are.
Yeah.
Which brings us to their broader cultural impact
Uh-huh.
and their lasting legacy.
Right.
These weren't just advertisements. No, they weren't.
They became something more.
Yeah, they became ingrained in the American consciousness.
I think you're right.
They're seen as these iconic pieces of Americana,
Yeah.
a tangible link to a bygone era.
Of advertising.
Yeah, and of rural life.
They really represent a unique and incredibly widespread form of branding.
That you just don't see anymore.
It's hard to imagine that today.
Right?
In our fragmented media world.
Absolutely.
There's a real sense of nostalgia with them.
Oh, yeah.
A feeling of rural charm, a slower pace of life.
Like a visual bookmark in our history.
Exactly. And that nostalgia has even spurred the formation of dedicated groups.
Really?
Like the Mail Pouch Barnstormers.
I heard of it.
It's an organization with over 140 members.
Yeah.
And they're passionate about documenting the remaining barns.
That's cool.
Tracking their locations and preserving their memory.
That's important work.
It is. So there are people out there actively recording and safeguarding the history of these landmarks.
That's good to hear.
And they've even uncovered some interesting variations in the signs themselves.
Oh, really?
Little differences that add to the story.
Like what?
Well, as they've been documenting all these barns, they've found different versions of the signs,
Mm-hmm.
like subtle variations in the imagery, the fonts used for the lettering,
Oh, wow.
and even some unexpected locations.
Unexpected.
Yeah, like a few were found in downtown Detroit.
What? In Detroit?
Yeah, in Detroit.
Wow, that's crazy.
I know it shows how far-reaching this campaign really was.
That's amazing.
And it's heartwarming to hear that some barn owners are now commissioning new versions of these signs
Oh, that's...
on their barns,
Yeah.
keeping the tradition alive,
Yeah, I like that.
even without the company's involvement.
Good for them.
It speaks to their appeal and cultural significance.
It really does. And, when you think about other barn advertisements from that time, for things like beech nut tobacco or local feed stores,
Right.
Mail Pouch really stands out.
Yeah.
Their design was so consistent.
Uh-huh.
And the scale and longevity of the campaign was just huge.
Really, in a league of its own.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what are the key takeaways here? What do you think is most important to remember about the Mail Pouch tobacco barns?
Well, I think, first of all, it's a story of an incredibly successful and enduring advertising strategy.
Okay.
They use a simple but powerful visual medium to reach a massive audience over decades.
Yeah.
And it also highlights the role of those dedicated individuals like Harley Warwick,
Uh-huh.
who really shaped this visual landscape.
Right.
And finally, it's a story about how these roadside advertisements became cherished landmarks
Right.
and the challenges of preserving them as time goes on.
It really does make you think.
It does.
When you're driving around today,
Yeah.
what other everyday things we see, billboards, buildings, even the designs of our cars,
Right.
what will become the nostalgic artifacts of the past?
What will people look back on and remember?
Yeah, and what stories will those things tell about us?
That's a fascinating thought.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's like those digital billboards we see everywhere now.
Right, with the ever-changing messages.
Maybe one day they'll evoke a sense of nostalgia.
Maybe people will miss them.
Or maybe it'll be the designs of electric cars that become the defining visual marker of our time.
Who knows? But it's fun to think about.
It is definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
In the meantime,
Uh-huh.
next time you're out there traveling, especially on those older, less traveled roads,
Yeah.
keep your eyes peeled for those fading icons.
Those mail pouch barns.
Exactly. They're a part of American history.
They are.
And if you see one, maybe take a picture.
Document it.
You could even share it with the mail pouch barnstormers.
Good idea.
It's a small way to help preserve this unique part of our past.
Our shared past.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
It's been fun.
It has.
Until next time.
See ya.